We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
Here in higher ed, I'm cycling through a lot of hats. I also have a team that I'm managing separate from this work. And then I have events going on separate from this work. So, to cycle through all of those hats and then sit down and write a custom program, I'm not saying that won't happen in the future, but that's not happening right now. Like right now, it's like the duck that you see going smoothly, but the little leggies are going, ah! Like that's what's happening for me.
Is programming a dying art form? Are programmers going to be needed in the future? These are some of the ongoing debates that have been discussed around the topic of programming versus configuration. We're going to discuss this and more on this episode of A State of Control. A State of Control, episode 127. You get the chicken. Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control, programming, and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. I'm Steve Greenblatt, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. One of the things that we're going to talk about, and this is a topic that I tend to really enjoy and has probably struck a chord with some people over time and has had some heated debates, and that is programming versus configuration. So that's our topic for today. And we have two great guests that are returning that are going to help share their insight and experience with that. And before we get to them, I get to say hi to my co-host and my friend, Rich Fregosa. Welcome, Uncle Richie. How are you?
I'm doing good. And I want to say thank you that you're better. So for those who may have not have seen the other prior episode, I pitched in, and I wanted the parentheses around the title would be Uncle Richie shuts the F up. So
well, it was a great episode.
I got to host, so I got to listen. So it was a great episode because there was really smart people and I didn't talk. So, but I missed you. I'm glad that you are back at the helm, Captain. And it's a wonderful spring day. So it's a good day for an episode.
Well, thanks for being there, having my back, and I appreciate you filling in and definitely have a listen to that episode. It's episode 126. If you've missed it, it's a great episode with some very quality contributions from our guests, Nick Miller and Patrick Murray. So check that out. It's about the future of AV programming. So on to our guests for today. We have two returning guests, as I mentioned. One was last with us on episode 124, and he's been with us for quite a number of shows. His name is Brian Magrogan from Verrex. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much for having me, Steve. Back, Steve. I can't wait. It's going to be a really good one. I got a little bit of twitch sometimes when I saw the outline.
I'm glad, and I think it's going to be one that will be able to provide some clarity to some people, but also have a little bit of fun with. So.
Absolutely.
And last but not least, we have a returning guest, and she was last with us on episode 125, and we've had her back just 2 episodes later. Her name is Britt Yenser. She's from Northampton Community College. She has a podcast called Brave Space, and she's also AVNation's AV Professional of the Year. So welcome, Britt. Thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks, guys. It's good to be here as always.
Glad to have you. So as I mentioned, for years, programmers have been kind of targeted. They've been talked about as being, maybe not needed in some time, because for several years, we had manufacturers touting this no programming required thing that was really a big theme at Infocom, and fortunately, it's quieted a little bit. But similar to other things within the world of technology and software, the AV brought to the market some no-code and low-code solutions that they called configuration, and programmers have a choice. They could write custom code, or they can go a configuration route. There's no harm, no foul. There's nothing that is lesser of them, but you have to understand what each approach entails and why you use them. And we're going to talk about that today. So that's really very important for us to really touch on. And I also want to define our terms so that we don't have any confusion. For the purposes of this podcast, we're going to call programming is going to be custom coding, and configuration is more of a no code or low code solution. And if we want to just talk about the whole idea of delivering a control solution, we'll use that term as really the overarching term that describes what we would normally call control programming. So, Rich, after all of that, can you help to break this down a little bit in terms of why somebody, or what factors you would consider in choosing one approach versus another? Because I think that's a good place for us to start.
What's interesting is that this is becoming an evergreen episode, because every, let's say 6 months now, between the ISE window and the Infocom window, there's a new development. We're in the software is eating the world stage. So the good news is that we at times see rapid development and rapid execution of new concepts, new ideas, new solutions for problems that are quickly showing up that we're faced with. The bad news is everybody's got a brand new idea on how to do it all over again. Right? What is it about standards? The great thing about standards, there's so many to choose from. That's what we're facing now with configuration systems. Add to it, we now have major players, the content providers, who are now dictating the process of integration. So before we had the bottom up, which was you've got a box, you've got a box, you've got a box. You didn't consider outside boxes. And so we're going to rise up to meet you. Now we have some behemoths in the unified communication world that are saying, this is it. You get the chicken. You get the chicken. No steak, no fish, you get chicken. And so we're sitting there going, all right. And so the configurable systems, as opposed to the custom coded systems, are becoming a customer-specific solution as opposed to an industry-wide solution, because now we would have a tool set, say if you were an integrator and you had your business development people, and you would come and you would offer this package up, right? You're on your 10-year cycle, your 5-year cycle. Here's the next 5-year or 10-year solution for what you're doing. These boxes, and away you go. Now, the business development people have to come in and say, what is your organization using to communicate from a software standpoint first? Then we have to go into our bag of tricks and say, okay, is it an ecosystem only solution where we are accessorizing, or is it a custom ecosystem where we are providing something bespoke? And that line is getting a lot more drawn in. And that's good. Again, scalability, feasibility, cost savings, ... In terms of the now. Where it's kind of tricky is if somebody out of our control and out of the customer's control changes the rules. And so now you have to have a very different discussion, which is, I know this looks appealing right now. And I know that you were demoed a process right now. But you don't know, and I don't know what version 3 of this is going to look like. Now, you got the same box, but there are no guarantees. And that's a tough conversation to have when you're trying to make the sale to begin with. I mean, you're basically towing the line of talking yourself out of a sale by being a doomsayer and saying, something bad could happen, in the future that you're going to have to pay for again, that I didn't do it. And so the configuration it's palatable, right? Here it is. We've developed it. We've built it around where you are right now. All's good, right? Thank you very much. We go away. And that's a great marketing sell. It's not necessarily an accurate sell. The programming side, bespoke, custom coding, whatever you want to call it, is I call it triage, right? I'm looking at what I have to stem first, and treat the immediate item, but at the same time, holistically looking out at the rest of that organism and saying, how could this affect outside? And there are different approaches in your skill set, your organization, your roadmap for how you approach a client. And at the same time, you're kind of hand in hand with your manufacturer vendor, but at the same time, you're also looking for that right cross coming that they go surprise. And so it's I find it exciting because it's a puzzle. And if you're in this industry, you like puzzles. If you're a business person, you hate this kind of puzzle. I've got both hats that I kind of have to fight with on it. They both have their place. I think you have to be firmly educated on both, because not every problem requires a hammer. If you've got a hammer on this side and you've got a screwdriver on this side, it's not A or B. You have to be willing to learn when to use the tool at the appropriate moment.
So Brian, now I'll pass it over to you. As somebody who has had an extensive background in programming, looking at configuration and using that, is that something that you look at as having an extra tool and an extra way to provide a solution? Or do you look at that kind of with a little bit of despise and say they've minimized what I do?
I don't want to say that I look at that with despise, in terms of being minimized what I do. I do lean more towards it's another tool, right? What's the right job for that tool? And I think that in a lot of scenarios, you might end up, as Richie was saying, right? You're looking at what piece of software do they use, right? What's their conferencing platform? Because that's going to dictate a lot. But you get in there and you can work with the configuration stuff, the larger pieces, which from the business aspect are probably the more profitable in the end, right? They're going to bring you more. Then you get to that bespoke application as well. So from a programming standpoint, I get to kind of have the best of both worlds and do some of each. To talk a little bit about what Richie was saying, there is the headache that can come with, what happens when, manufacturer A changes the rules on you and you don't know, right? And the sales demo that was given on version 3.0, version 4 is now the platform. It's totally different. How do you deal with that? How do you do? And that I think where my frustration comes in a lot there. I now have 3 different touch panels sitting on my desk running the major platforms just so I can see what they are. I can load my stuff to it and look at it and send legitimate screen grabs to people to show them this is how it's actually going to look as of right now. And that piece has been a bit of a challenge at points.
Britt, I want to bring you into the conversation, and I know that we've talked that you're newer to providing AV control solutions, and configuration has been a great onboarding ramp for you. Talk a little bit about your experience with it, and also whether this is something that you look at as a stepping stone to doing more, or do you feel like this is something that you are just looking to embrace and say, hey, I can be really skilled at using this tool and it could really satisfy my needs, I don't necessarily need to look beyond it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so when Rich was talking before, he had talked about the person who's doing business is going to think about something differently than the person who's programming. Sometimes, though, that person is one person wearing two hats. So here in higher ed, I'm cycling through a lot of hats, right? Like I'm not just doing a configuration of the system. I also am the person who made the design decisions for that system. I'm also the person who did all the project management steps that go along with making this system and putting it into place. I also have a team that I'm managing separate from this work. And then I have events going on separate from this work. So, to cycle through all of those hats and then sit down and write a custom program, I'm not saying that won't happen in the future, but that's not happening right now. Like right now, it's like the duck that you see going smoothly, but the little leggies are going, ah! Like that's what's happening for me. So I really like being able to follow that configuration model because it is meeting the needs. We're not doing anything super insane in a classroom. The faculty member wants it to be super simple. They want to press a button and turn it on, and then press another button and have their computer show up on the screen. And that's it. That's all they want to do. And that doesn't really require a super fancy custom code.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think anybody who's doing even no matter which approach they're using, they could be very proud of the outcome that they're coming up with because it still requires a level of expertise and it still requires that base knowledge, which we tend to talk about on the show, as programmers are not just somebody who writes code and that's real, that's just a part of their role. So thank you for clarifying that.
I think she brought up a really good point too, Steve. Britt is very lucky. She's in the design scenario, right? Because a lot of these decisions happen then, right? Mm-hmm. People may not even realize that that's where they're making a decision of, okay, we can go configuration based or we have to go totally custom based. And so I think, Britt, you're very lucky that you're there. And for myself, I have a great relationship with our design team and they pull us in all the time of, hey, is this something that we can control? Is this something that has been reliable in the past? But I think, that does come into the overall conversation as well as which path you go is the design considerations.
Let's talk about that a little bit more because, and dig in because I think that's important. Is it, let's talk about maybe some examples or some specifics as to how the design impacts the approach. Brian, if you want to start, and Britt, you can certainly jump in.
I mean, in a lot of scenarios, right, you got to look at the core of the system, whether it be for myself, how's the switching working? What's the audio DSP? What are those pieces? And, if I am designing a configurable base, whether it be coming specifically from a manufacturer, they're out of the box, or, I'm writing configurable code for a specific customer, I've got to know those parameters and know that, hey, we can't branch off manufacturer A just because you like manufacturer B a little bit more now. That's going to change the entire base. That's not supported yet. So now, instead of being able to go to Infocom, being able to go to ISC and go to each booth and be like, oh, great. Hey, this, smaller company has this awesome solution that I think we can use there. It's like, sorry, that's not supported in the configuration model. So those pieces of it, really looking at the hardware when I dig into that design, those become very key for me. And Britt, I'm sure it's very similar for you when you're doing the design and laying it out. You have your certain go-tos, but then you have to have backups as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I think is worth noting is you always have to make sure you're in communication with your stakeholders and you know what the end goal is. And you always have that in mind, because I might walk into a room and have all sorts of ideas about what this room could look like. And then the faculty member will tell me, I just show PowerPoints, I really just need to show a PowerPoint and that's it. And I'm like, oh, all right, well, that blows a lot of my ideas out of the water, but you made it really simple for me.
Simple is good, right? It's, in a lot of cases, simple is good. Keep it simple. It can be helpful. I love to try to keep the front end as simple as possible. And I think that, the soft conference manufacturers, Zoom and Teams, have pushed us in that direction, but then also bury some of that more advanced functionality on a tech page somewhere. Things that I know that people are going to be like, I do this once a year, or I do this once every 6 months. Oh, that's there. We put that there for you. Don't worry about it. It's right here. You can do it on your own, and try to think ahead, because I think that does show, if you go back to the business side of it, the value of us and the value of continuing to come back to us as we are thinking ahead, so that you do have that flexibility later, even if you are more in a configuration base.
Britt, when you are designing a system, do you lean on manufacturers to help in that regard, to say, hey, these are the products that we work well with, or do you use other resources? And what's a good approach to take that you would recommend to others that are listening?
Yeah, so know what your goal is, and then do your research on what manufacturer is going to meet that goal at a larger scale. So being in higher ed, I have 215 rooms across 3 physical campuses, and I want to keep those as consistent as possible. So I will go to the manufacturer. Oftentimes, though, having done my research in advance, what I'm asking them to do is fact check me. So I'll say, this is what I'm looking to do. What are your recommendations? And then I'll see their recommendations and compare them to what I was already planning, and then make some decisions based off of that.
I like that. This way, you still have the power in your hands, if you will. Mm-hmm. So that's a great insight, and I think a good tip for everybody.
Being educated about what it can do is huge.
Yes.
Right? Understanding that ahead of time, especially too then when you talk to the sales guy that wants to sell you the whole thing, it's like, wait, hold on, I'm looking at that, I'm not sure that it actually can do that. Like, oh, that's planned for firmware version 7 and we're on 3.
I'm going to ask Rich probably the harder question, is that when you are going down one path or another, it's hard to really switch gears and come back. How do you have the conversations with a client or with somebody who is going to be in a decision-making role as to, saying, no, I can't do this, or that this isn't a good idea because of the route that we took with regard to programming versus configuration? We know configuration has some limitations around it, but programming can also get kind of messy.
I use their unified communication technology to prove my point. I set up virtual meetings with virtual examples of both paths, and then we walk through. And again, most of us, if it's a concept that we're not actively part of, you can comprehend kind of on that high level, on that intellectual. It's like, okay, I understand, but trying to picture something comes from experiencing something and having a memory to access. And like, if you're making something new, you're actually relying on for me at least, my visual memory of what I did before. And so I'm able then to extrapolate what I'm doing going further. That is a luxury that only I have in the conversation. And when I'm sitting with people that I'm partnered with on kind of our rank and file side, my first conversation these days is, we do not want to get clever for the sake of being clever. Start there. And then when I've got an end user, and again, I've been exposed to a new vertical, so like I've had to relearn I'm enthusiastic, right? I'm rock and roll. I'm like, isn't this effing cool? Right? But that's always been the experience, because I came from a estate bespoke, I had my roots are from 2-channel audio and home theater. So everything from my core comes from a visceral experience. I used to always say, I'm here to create the soundtrack of your life. Like in your home, that makes sense. That's like my memories, my youth, all of these things, right? That's an emotional connection. I don't get that in a courtroom. So, so I'm like, I'm going to bring back the guy you sentenced to life. Isn't that awesome? So, so I've had to retool my message. And again, 30 something years in, going, hey, that song don't play. So we, as we are continuing to evolve our craft, have to continually focus on reading the room. And I found that rather than trying to explain the bits and bolts, web page designers have been doing it for years. You show the framework, right? You wireframe it out. Is it going to be that this is, right now, are you going to get your Pantone color of your brand? No, you're not. Like, if you want it, I'll show it to you, but that's not important right now. Right now, I need you to be able to touch, feel, experience the first part, and then touch, feel, experience the second part. Now I can show you where these go together, and I show you where they're different. And then I'm going to give you the information for you to make an educated decision, not based on the high-level technical stuff that I told you, but based upon how did it feel? And that makes it easier for them to go in, if they're not potentially the decision maker, or if they are the decision maker, to defend their decision, right? But because, again, we like puzzles, we're more worried about the shape of the piece. We don't actually step back and go, oh, hey, that's a cow in a field. You know what I mean? So if I could impart one lesson for me in the past 12 months in a crash course in unified communication, that's where I've had more successes than setbacks in getting my message across.
So, Brian, I guess follow that up a little bit in terms of, you have to work with people on your team. You also have to work with clients. One of the challenges that we tend to run into is making changes, and that can also be a very difficult approach to take. It's one thing when everything is well defined, and as Rich said, it's important to really figure out that scope and what those requirements are and get people's buy-in. But those changes that come in down the road can be challenging depending on the approach taken. Talk a little bit about that experience and how you've handled it.
I think you bring up a very good point there. And I think that piece, we've all been really bit by that, right? But that piece, we have to protect ourselves, and we do a lot of steps in the process to make it as easy for everybody and the best chance of success. And what I mean by that is starting, like Rich just said, with some wireframing, right? Getting that look and feel and like how you actually move around and things in front of people, in front of decision makers, so they can say, yes, I like this, or no, I don't like this. And then have a follow-up conversation of, okay, based on your decisions here, we are going to go this path. And this path, we can achieve everything you like, but here are the limitations. I just want you to understand those. And having that documented back and forth, we used to write a theory of ops, and the theory of ops included, here's what everything will do. But one key piece that we always missed in that was, here's what it is not going to do. And when you go to refer back to that document later, It's like, well, but you didn't tell me that it wasn't going to do that. You just didn't put it in this document. So now, while I work with people and while we do the design and we're doing the implementation of things, pieces that have bit me in the past, I now know to say, I'll give you an example. Right now, I'm working on a quad divisible system, and we have designated one of the rooms to be the primary room. The client just tried to flip it on me, and now they want any room to be the primary room. And when programming a quad divisible system like that, that gets real messy real fast, as I'm sure anybody listening to this knows. And you want to avoid messy, right? We want to keep it simple so that we don't create problems down the road. And so we were able to point back at that theory of ops, which was agreed upon, of room B is the primary room. In any combination, room B will be the primary. And that's the way that that's going to work. And hey, if we want to talk about, I would like that to be moved around. Okay, that's fine. Great, we can talk about that. But we can't talk about that for your date in 2 weeks. We can talk about that for a date down the road. So, and it all kind of cascades from there. I think from a programmer standpoint, a lot of the frustration I always run into is time frame, right? And trying to jam so much into a short time frame because of where we get brought in the process. And any level that we can do to protect ourselves there, and any level we can do to have a leg to stand on later on, like, I want to get you this solution. I want it to work as well as it possibly can, and I want to get it to you on time. And this is what I can do in order to make that happen. So I know there's a lot in there, but it's a very sensitive topic at points, especially with the one I'm working on at the moment.
Britt, I was going to ask you a similar question, being that you're in a unique position where you're really working with people that are sort of on the same team, within the same organization, but I'm sure that there's still challenges involved. Is defining the details and really being very diligent in letting your users know what they can and can't have. Is that something that you find is critical to your success?
It definitely is. Like, you have to be able to sit down with that person. I love to have the meeting in the room itself so that we're both physically present and looking around and talking about what they want to do in that space. What do they want it to look like? What do they want it to feel like? Like, what is this sensory experience that they're looking for? And what is the ultimate outcome in terms of the student learning experience? So is this faculty member a little bit more sage on the stage? Or are they going to be putting students into groups, into pods? Like, what is the ultimate use case for this room, and what are the students learning? And that's going to change from building to building, from department to department. The way an English faculty teaches is not the same as the architecture teacher, is not the same as the funeral services department, right? So being in a community college, we're all over the place. And we literally are, I see your face, Rich, we really are one of the very few colleges in this nation that we have a funeral services department. We absolutely do. And they have very unique and interesting AV needs over there. That could be an episode all on its own where I ramble about what they need. So you absolutely have to talk to them, ideally in this space, get their ideas. And also, because it's higher ed, we have to set reasonable expectations for how much money we're spending, right? And sometimes that comes down to really understanding the flow of a space as an expert. So, for example, a faculty member might feel really excited about the idea of putting TVs on every wall, as they would call them, right? But I might remind them, like, okay, but in this room, most of the students are sitting facing one direction. So what if we just focused on this one wall as where displays are instead of all four walls? So just being able to kind of have that conversation, rein people in, set reasonable expectations that are still meeting needs.
That's a key to a lot of successful projects that should be insight very well, received by our audience, and probably a good place for us to stop this one on a high note. So thank you for that. I would like to thank our guests for being part of the show. First off, Brian Magrogan from Verrex. how can people get in touch with you, learn more about Verrex or anything else you're up to?
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show again, Steve. It's always a great Britt. It was wonderful to meet you. So you can certainly find me, as Uncle Richie would say, on all the socials at B Magrogan. Feel free to pop in on Verrex on the World Wide Web, or all the socials as well at Verrex. But thank you again. This was a great conversation. It's always good to have these. Gives me lots of ideas.
Thanks for being a part of it. And Britt, we're going to take you up on this funeral services thing. So stand by, because this could be a special episode. How could people get in touch with you? Thank you for being part of the show. First off, how could people get in touch with you, learn about your podcast, learn about things you're doing with HETMA, and other your other ventures within the industry?
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to hang out. I am on X and Blue Sky as Brave Brit. I am on LinkedIn as Britt Yenser CTS. If you are a member of HETMA, which is free to join and free to be a member of, you can find me on our mighty network. So that would be hetma.org. And my podcast, Brave Space, is available at higheredav.com, as well as your podcast player of choice.
And if you haven't already tuned in, I highly recommend it. So please listen, and you really learn a lot about a lot of important people in the industry, and a lot of topics that aren't always talked about. So thanks for having that podcast and sharing that with the industry. Rich, another great episode. Any takeaways that you had, and how can people get in touch with you and keep the conversation going?
Britt, I have so many questions. But that's for another episode. See, that's a teaser. See, you're learning. See, if you're running your podcast, you got to learn. Pitch the teaser. However, if you want to track me down on the interwebs, you can find me on all the socials at rfregosa. You can find the company, fregosadesign.com. First and foremost, as I always like to say, I would love for you to find me here on AVNation.tv and our suite of shows serving all of the verticals in our market, and hopefully right here on these episodes, but there's tons of others that are out there with great information. And obviously the best way that we can keep showing up is if you help support our sponsors.
And I'll also add that Rich and I are very approachable, so please reach out to us with any ideas or feedback or things you want to talk about, as well as if you're interested in being a guest on the show. We are always looking for new voices and new perspectives, so please reach out to us about that. And for me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. My company, Control Concepts, we provide some of the building blocks that help configuration and programming be successful, whether you're integrating with new products or you're trying to do some advanced functionality. We have some of that at our website at controlconcepts.net. And as Rich said, please help support this show by leaving a rating, review, share your favorite episode. We really appreciate knowing that our listeners are out there, and also learning more about what they're interested in hearing about. And that's what we have for today. And this has been A State of Control,
the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hi, this is Jennifer Goodyear
and Erica Carroll
from the Women in AV podcast, where we are encouraged by the incredible stories of women in AV.
Listen in on fun, empowering conversations as we chat with inspiring women, breaking barriers and creating their own path in the industry.
Check out Women in AV on avnation.tv or wherever you get your podcasts.